Welcome to Lost Without Japan, a travel podcast about the life-changing experiences of exploring Japan and those moments we would be lost without. For your listening pleasure, allow me to introduce your very own Kanko Guido, Michael.
Welcome to a special Lost Without Moments bonus interview episode of the Lost Without Japan podcast. Our bi-weekly podcast is focused on getting you to Japan for your first visit or to make your next adventure to Japan even better than your last. Today's special interview episode is with Peter from Snow Monkey Resorts in Nagano, Japan, and we're going to cover an amazing amount of services that will do just that. Make that next trip of yours to Japan unforgettable. This is your Kanko Guido for TKIC Studio Productions, coming to you with hopes and dreams of a return to travel for himself and others, still holding out hope for summer 2022. I'd like to thank you all for giving me a bit of your time today, and I truly hope this podcast finds you in a good place or on the path to a better one, no matter how it may seem at this moment. My belief is that we could all use a beacon like this one in our lives to help guide us during these times, and my hope is that Japan, along with this show, will become that for you. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're a returning Lost Without listener, thank you for returning. For today's show, let me introduce a special guest from snowmonkeyresort.com, Peter. I must say I'm truly thankful for you setting aside time again today to join me for this interview. Peter, you're giving Stephanie a run for money for quickest to return, but I got to tell you, sorry, my friend, silver medal, second place, second quickest to return, but thank you, Peter, for coming today.
My pleasure, Michael. So good to speak to you again, and I'll take anything I can get. Looking forward to talking monkeys, Nagano, in Japan.
Look forward to it, my friend. Now, I've traveled to Japan multiple times, and I think it's easy to fall into a trap where you plan activities that are just based on, like, if you pull up Google or whatever your favorite search engine is and type Japan, you're going to pull up Tokyo, you're going to pull up Kyoto, you'll pull up some things possibly from Osaka as well. But, you know, what I'm finding, the more I interview others that are in Japan that are running businesses like yours, Peter, is that I've been missing out, my friend. And I feel that listeners of the show, if they go to Japan and listen, hey, if all you can do is go to Tokyo and that's it, listen, I'm not going to say no. Do it. You're going to have a blast of a time. But I feel the more that I'm, expanding, what I do when I go to Japan as well, if you only do Tokyo and let's say Tokyo, Kyoto, you're missing out. You need to at least have that day trip set aside to see the rest of Japan and really see what things are like. And your, services, everything that you have to offer would be a great choice for somebody to do that. And like I said, I'm so fortunate to have you join us today. Welcome, Peter. This is your chance again here for a little bit of an extended share about yourself and things with listeners of Lost Without Japan. But before we get to you sharing too much, what can, if listeners are like snow monkeys, I'm in, Peter. Nagano, I'm in. Where can they go to reach out to you to kind of inquire about services, set different things up with you, ask additional questions as they look to book these trips that I'm hoping happen sooner rather than later?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of reaching out to us, by far the best option is through our website. Our website is very easy to remember. It's snowmonkeyresorts.com. Obviously, on the website, you're going to find everything you need to know about the snow monkeys. I'm sure we're going to go into a bit of detail about the monkeys, but you'll find everything you need to know about how to get there, what to expect, the reasons you should go. Also, the tours and services we provide revolving around the monkeys. So I think, obviously, as the company's name suggests, snowmonkeyresorts.com, we actually started focused purely on the monkeys, taking tours in and out of the monkey park. And over the course of the last few years, thanks to very generous guests who have booked with us, we've managed to expand our services to obviously still a large focus on the monkeys, but many, many more things. Tours to different areas in Nagano and the surrounding prefectures. We branched out into supplying some accommodation, travel packages, and importantly, being Nagano, ski packages. Nagano, as some of the listeners probably rings a bell for a few listeners. Nagano hosted the 1998 Winter Olympics. It's home to around 80 ski resorts, the most ski resorts of any area in Japan. We would, of course, argue the best ski resorts, although our friends in Hokkaido would also have something to say about that, but we're going to argue that ours are the best for various reasons. But also that it includes Japan's largest ski resort, Shikokogen, which is actually very nearby the monkey park. So we provide a range of services, not just monkeys. We also, our website, if you visit, provides information about Nagano, the surrounding areas making up central Japan, which we consider our home region, but also lots of information about other areas of Japan, including Tokyo. You're going to find information on there, for example, our recommendations, the best museums in Tokyo, the best things to do in Kyoto, the best things to do in Hokkaido, Okinawa, and all types of places. So yeah, by far, our website is the best place to visit. We also have social media accounts, Instagram, Twitter, and what am I forgetting? Facebook, under the same name, snowmonkeyresorts.com. But to be honest, we haven't been maintaining those as much during COVID, but hopefully with the borders hopefully set to reopen, we'll start to be more active on those accounts again. So if you were to contact us through our social media accounts, we would reply to you.
For sure. And I got to say, like, if I can, go ahead and pause the show for a moment here and pull up the website. It is how I found Peter and found Snow Monkey Resorts. It wasn't even I wasn't even searching for Nagano, but the resources that I found were, for other places that were there. And as I started to look at this, I'm like, wait a second, we were going to be looking to do Nagano probably a little bit later in the year. But this is a perfect time, I think, to kind of share that you really, that website's amazing. And you can quickly see, and we'll get into this in a little bit later too, but there's so much to do in Nagano, and it's not limited in any way, shape, or form to winter. So it's just great, truly great.
Yeah, that's right. So actually, obviously, our peak season is winter. Nagano is best known for its ski resorts, its mountains, its snow, and of course the snow monkeys. But quite interesting, actually, for domestic tourism, for Japanese coming to Nagano, the peak season is actually in the summer rather than the winter. It's still very busy in winter with Japanese coming here to take advantage of the ski resorts and to visit the monkeys. But yeah, interestingly, Japanese tend to see it as an all year round destination. And I hope that message comes across through the website, because we really want to bring people here, attract people to our home region, or no matter what time of year they're visiting Japan. And that goes for the monkeys as well. The monkeys, actually, the name Snow Monkeys is a little bit misleading because the monkeys are at the park or come into the park at all times of year. So they're there in spring, summer, and autumn. And each of those seasons gives its own incentives to visit. And I would actually argue that they're just as good as visiting in winter. So it really is all year round destination.
No doubt about it. And I think for, we're going to go into talk a little bit later as well. I'm going to encourage people to, go to Nagano and actually make sure to spend the night and support the local businesses and things that are there and family run, locations and things that are here. But if all you can do is a day trip, then do that. Again, it's refreshing to get out of those bustling cities, and at the end of the day, you're going to find a part of Japan that you wouldn't see otherwise. And if it isn't already, I think it's in the water when you visit, that you just want to return. But seeing something else there, especially Nagano or these other places that we've talked about, are going to keep you coming back and just find new things to do with your time. Now, Peter, the following part we're going to talk to is kind of about you. How much you share about you is truly up to you. But we, but I feel like we've done this once before, Peter. But this is going to be all
Yes.
like that practice for this moment now, my friend. So go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself, your Japan experiences, some personal things if you'd like, and we'll go on from there.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so obviously my name is Peter. I'm originally from Melbourne, Australia. I've been living in Japan now a total of around, I think, 7 years. So the way I came to Japan was kind of similar to, I guess, a lot of people's stories. I first took a teaching position in Niigata. So Niigata is the prefecture to our north, very similar to Nagano. Lots of big mountains, not so many people, very beautiful traditional lifestyle. The reason I took that position was kind of on a whim. I was mid-career in Melbourne in a job that, didn't give me many reasons to leave, but I really wasn't sure it was what I wanted to be doing. I kind of a career I fell into. So one positive of that job was I could take time off. So I took a year off, and just on a whim, I thought I want to go experience living in rural Japan. So I applied for a teaching position and was placed in a school up in a town called Tokomachi in Niigata, Japan. And I came over, the contract was for a year, but I ended up extending to a year and a half. And I just loved the experience. While I was there, that area of Japan hosts a very large arts festival called Echigo Tsumari. Some people might have heard of it, but I think a lot of listeners certainly would have heard of the very famous art island called Naoshima down on the Seto Inland Sea, and the art festival there called Setouchi. Very, very popular. There's actually a predecessor of that festival. It was Echigo Tsumari, the festival in Niigata, which is still running. The official festival is every 3 years with a smaller one every summer. But the Australian government is involved in that festival and sends artists over each summer to reside in Niigata. And I volunteered while I was there teaching English. I volunteered there to assist the artists, and just kind of fell in love with that lifestyle and rural Japan in general. And so I actually wrapped up my time, made my decisions about my career, that it was time to move on. And then just as I was leaving Japan, right at the end, I met my now wife, which was quite unexpected. We ended up doing long distance for quite a long period of time. I ended up moving abroad to a different country for a while. And then one thing led to another. I left that career. I enrolled. I went back and did a master's online with an Australian university, and at that point decided, let's go back to Japan. And I wanted to move into cultural tourism. And I was very fortunate that just as I was wrapping up my master's, I found this job. And so I joined Snow Monkey Resorts as a part-time guide. Basically, the day after I handed in my final research paper for my master's, I started this job, which was really fantastic. I began as a part-time guide, and then pretty quickly became full-time. At that time, this is the pre-COVID days, our business was expanding really quickly, so we were taking on part-time guides, both Japanese and foreign resident guides. We make a point of using both because it gives our guests a really good, diverse experience and different views of Japan. And so then my job became managing, training and supporting those guides, creating the tours, improving the tours, so to speak, and writing the content for our website. So today my job really is I write all the content on our website. So for better or for worse, but that's all there. What you see on the website, I basically have written. And at the moment, because there's not much tourism happening right now, but the tours we do get bookings from foreign residents of Japan. I'm out guiding those a lot and involved in creating new tours for hopefully for when inbound comes back quite soon.
And Peter, I feel like we could talk for hours on end, especially even on some of the things that you had in between. Like after you left Japan, before coming back to Japan with your wife. There's so much that we could talk about in that regard. So with that, there's so much to do, and especially the area that you're in for hiking, fun with snow. What are your biggest Japan interests?
Well, there's so many. And one of the things I really like about my job as a guide is it allows you to remember what it was like when you were first here. So when you have especially your guests who are in Japan for the first time, and a lot of them, when they join our tours, it might be their first time outside one of the major cities. So they're really encountering a new side of Japan, and you're part of that experience. And hopefully we are enhancing that experience for them, something I really enjoy. But it allows me to remember what it was like when I was first seeing these things. And so one of the reasons I think Japan is just an ideal travel destination is that it's easy to travel around. Firstly, everything works, it's efficient, it's clean, it's safe, and things are familiar. I guess we're talking largely to a Western audience. Things are very familiar to Westerners, but everything is kind of different, making it really easy but fascinating to move around. And so the things that I was initially attracted to were the same things I think that most people are. It's the food, the traditional architecture, the weirdness of many aspects of especially the urban culture.
Yes.
But then
yes.
over time, because I've been here for up to around 7 years now, I find that especially through my job, it actually introduces you to things that you may otherwise not have discovered. And I'm increasingly more interested in the really traditional parts of Japan. And that's when I say that, I'm talking about things like Shintoism. Japan is a bit unique in that most Japanese subscribe to two religions. Buddhism, which is the introduced religion, and Shintoism, which is the native religion. And I always say to my guests on my tours, I think if you really want to understand the Japanese heart, you really need to delve into Shintoism, what it's all about. If you want to understand the Japanese mind, that's kind of Buddhism. If you want to understand the heart and what really makes Japan tick, Shintoism. And I realize maybe some of the listeners aren't as familiar with what Shintoism is all about. I won't bore you too much to go into the details, but one of the things I really like about it in Shintoism, there's a strong environmental message. Nature worship is extremely important to Shintoism. So I think that message is relevant to anybody, doesn't matter which country you're from. I think, talking to guests from all around the world, everybody says the same thing. And, the environment and things like this is really on their mind. And so Shintoism has a very strong, positive environmental message. So I think it's relevant to all of our lives. And it gives a real insight into what Japan is all about. Extending from that, Shintoism believes in things like spirits, literally believes in them. And you get into the whole side of kind of yokai culture in Japan. They believe in spirits, ghosts, ghouls, and these things. And I find this aspect of Japan really fascinating. So that's kind of what I kind of find myself reading about and going to different places to learn more about. In terms of really more basic things, hot springs, the onsen is something that I love. If I were to leave Japan, I would really miss that aspect of life. And so obviously that links in to the monkeys very much. The monkeys are very famous for bathing in the hot springs. And so anyone who comes to Japan, I would really encourage you to make a point of seeking out the hot springs. Now, I think a lot of Westerners are maybe nervous the first time they do it because, as you're probably aware, to enter the hot spring, you must be wearing no clothes at all. And so that can be a little bit intimidating. But my advice is don't worry about it. It's a totally normal part of Japanese culture. They're not bothered by it, so don't let it bother you. If you are bothered, a lot of onsens, especially the nicer hotels with their own onsens, will offer the option of a private onsen. And so that's something which I would really encourage people to seek out when they're here.
And it's true. That's 100% because, it's something that is nerve-wracking if you're not used to, but you'll find once you're in the water, how comfortable you become. And then every time after, you realize the people around you, this is not a big deal.
Exactly.
And it is. It's one of those additional experiences you can have, for now. Beyond that onsen and beyond that Shinto part of things, like, but beyond, my hope of being reincarnated as a monkey in Nagano.
It's not a bad life.
No, really not. And I can agree with you. We could talk about experiences for Shinto. I'm not more of a spiritual person, but if, one of those things, if that was out more in the world, just as far as the respect to everything, everyone, all those different parts, what a better place, we'd be in, just as a whole. So it is something. The more that I'm there, the more meaningful it becomes to myself as well. But one of the reasons I go to Japan beyond seeing these wonderful sights is food. And what are some of your favorite foods or places that you like to visit for a meal in Japan, or a snack? We can add snacks,
Yeah. Where do we start and where do we stop, really? So I think again, one of the great things of travel to any country is the food, isn't it? So Japan is no different, and it's just, when it comes to food, you're spoiled for choice here. Uh, if I had to name one, I would go straight for seafood. I already loved seafood before I came to Japan, and then when you come here, wow, it's just fantastic. It's such a big part of the diet here, such a diverse part of the diet, really fantastic. Bad news for me, though, is that Nagano is landlocked. We have no coastline, no beaches. However, luckily, we're quite close to the north coast, Niigata, Toyama, Ishikawa. As I already mentioned, my wife is originally from Niigata, so we go up there quite often to see her family or friends. And as much as possible, we make a point when we do that to go to the coastal markets and the restaurants that are literally attached to the fish markets, where the fresh catch is coming in, and you buy, the meals that you're buying, having there, have literally been caught that morning. So really, that's my go-to meal. I'd happily eat it every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner if I could. So seafood is definitely my first choice. In terms of if you're coming to Nagano, as I said, Nagano is a mountainous area. Most of Japan's tallest mountains are in Nagano. I should actually maybe just quickly, on a little bit of a tangent, just in case people aren't kind of familiar with where Nagano is. Nagano is located to the northwest of Tokyo. It's quite a large prefecture. It's the fourth largest prefecture, and it's largely mountainous. So it's at some distance from Tokyo, but thanks to the Shinkansen, the bullet train, it's only around 80 to 110 minutes, depending which service you take. So an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's very, very easy to get here. So it's easy to get to from Tokyo, but in all other regards, it's really a world away. You forget about the massive urban sprawl of Tokyo. You're not going to get that here. Nagano City is a small little city, and within 10 minutes of being in the city, you can be out into the forest and into the mountains. It's a beautiful place. Being in the mountains, one of the traditional aspects of diet here is what they call jibie. Jibie is wild meat or game meat that's hunted in the forests. And so when you're in Nagano City, you're going to see a lot of jibie restaurants serving things that you'd expect, like deer. Deer are called shika in Japanese, inoshishi, which is wild boar, duck, things like this. And so I really love jibie. Again, I take every chance I can to go and get it, and it's served in all different ways. I think it's just fantastic. You're going to also, if you go to a jibie restaurant in Nagano, you might encounter some more, unique or kind of exotic things. You may occasionally see bear on the menu. Whether that's something that you want to try, totally up to you. But it's, that's just an example of something which is a bit more unusual. And I said, it is a traditional part of the diet. All the restaurants are obtaining their meat sustainably and ethically. It's legal, the meat that they're eating here. So that's a really interesting part of the diet. The other thing that I would also say, if you're in this area, is to seek out sansai. Sansai is wild vegetables or mountain vegetables. And so we're currently in sansai season at the moment. So if you drive up into the forest around Nagano right now or into the mountains, you'll see a lot of Japanese out there picking the wild vegetables to bring home to prepare in different ways. One of my favorite ways to have it is tempura. Tempura is the lightly battered and fried, and they said that all types of wild vegetables, but they also might just put it in with noodles. They might pickle it, and all different ways of preparing it. So I'd say in terms of what in Nagano, I really enjoy jibie, the meat, and sansai, the wild vegetables.
I super excited for kind of that vegetable talk of things that's there, because it's one of those things, like every area has something to offer. And, for listeners, there's a wide variety of people that are listening to the show that may have a bunch of different interests. But it seems like every time I talk to somebody, I'm adding more to my list. I may have to have that multiple lifetimes, I think, to touch upon everything that I'm looking to. But that's one more reason to get outside of those like the main cities themselves and see something else that you, especially if it's for dining, that you may not have experienced at all. And who knows, you may go back home and start searching out some things that you may not have otherwise. So just great.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Because one of the reasons that if you look at our website, it's we don't just have information about our region, but we have information about all regions of Japan. And one of the reasons that we do that is a realization from talking to guests on tours that obviously, their itinerary is basically locked in before they arrive in Japan. And so a lot of people, when they come on our tours, it might be their first time. And for some people, it's their only time outside of a major city. It's interesting. I can't remember the exact statistics, but despite how huge tourism into Japan pre-COVID was, something like 60 or 70% of those people never leave these urban centers like Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka. And so what we often found was that the guests on our tours would come out, it'd be their first or possibly their only time out of a city. They love it. And they would remark to us, oh, if I'd only known, I would have actually allowed much more time to explore outside of the cities. And so I'd really encourage anyone to do it. But it's also one of the reasons that we provide information, not just about our region on our website, about all regions. So hopefully people can build that complete itinerary and take in not just the cities, but the regional areas and rural areas of Japan that are just as much a part of the Japanese story as the big cities like Tokyo.
All right, and that's it. And at the end of the day, like the more we kind of can learn about everyone else and each other, just adds to who we are and just a better understanding of everyone. And all of these different experiences you can have, especially if it is, you're not like myself where you don't enjoy spending 2 weeks researching one location that you're going to. And yeah. I find that fascinating and I love it. Yeah. And it's just nonstop. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, Mike, I don't want to leave this to myself. I don't want to mess something up. I'd much rather just give this to someone else that knows what they're doing. And, especially, if you're going to be going to try to set this up and go to Nagano and go through, why not take it from somebody that is there, that knows the area, has done many trips, and can give that experience to you the best you can. And that's one thing that I'm beginning to realize is that even though I've been to Japan so many times, I'm missing out a bit by not, kind of reaching out to some people for different things. And just kind of either further accenting, what my trip is, what my experience is, and get even more. I mean, just because you've been someplace a bunch of times doesn't mean that you have to do it on your own. And that's one reason of many that I'm happy about doing these interviews. And it's going to be great to reach out and touch base, as things open up and go from there. So it's great.
Absolutely.
And for us, one other thing that I'd like to talk with you here, we got, many questions to follow here, but one that we've both been waiting for is what are your go-to locations to visit when you're not in Nagano, Japan, my friend?
Oh, okay. So quite a few, actually. So as I mentioned, we quite regularly head up to Niigata. I said my wife is from Niigata. So Niigata is certainly one of my favorite places to get to outside of Nagano. It's very similar to Nagano. It's a large prefecture, lots of mountains, and the northern coast. So we spend a lot of time up there, and especially in the summer with the arts festival I mentioned, Echigo Tsummari, we very much like to head up there, take advantage of that. It's a really interesting initiative with artists from both international and Japanese, and the concept behind that is that it's a collaboration between the local people and the artists and people trying to attract new life, kind of revitalizing areas that are really struggling with economic and population decline. Outside of Niigata, and I'd like to, because as I said, we do live regionally, so we get a good chance to head into the mountains and do those type of things on our weekends. If I'm going to go a little bit further afield to a city, for example, I like heading to Osaka. Osaka, to me personally, I prefer it over Tokyo. It's similar. It's a huge city, just like Tokyo, but I find it a bit more accessible as a foreigner than Tokyo. I find people there are just naturally more inclined to talk to you, and you're more likely to get into conversations. It's a fantastic food city, which I really like. Great shopping, great entertainment. If you're somebody who likes a bit of nightlife to go out and have a good time, I think Osaka's a great city. You're obviously going to find a lot of fun in Tokyo, but I think Osaka, it's just a bit easier to open those doors and you feel like you're a bit more welcome sometimes. Tokyo, I think, can be very cool and a little bit too cool. But Osaka's a really good place to go. So that would be my recommendation outside of our immediate area.
And I have to agree with you because when my son and I are returning, we're actually one of the places we're basing ourselves out of, rather than just Kyoto itself, is just putting ourselves in Osaka. There's so much around it, the city itself, and I've even found that I can find some of the same items that I'm see in Tokyo in Osaka, and for definitely a cheaper price. Now, I'm
Mm.
if I find something somewhere, I'm not gonna wait to try to find it again. I will buy it, but it's not gonna matter. But like, really, Osaka is a great place to do some shopping when it comes to that regards, and the people are great in that surrounding area. It's kind of like the same thing that I felt in Hiroshima. The food is wonderful. There's so many different things to experience, and just with that location where it is, you're so close to everything. I think it's a great place to start our talk with that, and we'll continue here with another recommendation.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think Osaka, as I said, we really consider our region, or the region that we cover as Snow Monkey Resorts, is kind of central Japan. So central Japan, you can define it differently, but we define it really as from Tokyo in the east across to Kyoto and Osaka in the west, and then coming up to the north, which is up towards, it includes our region, and then with Kanazawa being the main city to the north. And one of the reasons that we define it in that way, because if you kind of draw a line between those three points, in the middle, it's all mountains, and so that's really the heart and soul of Japan. Japan is largely a mountainous country, but the other reason that we do that is as inbound for inbound tourists, it's very easy to move between those cities because from Tokyo to Osaka, you have the Tokaido Shinkansen, the bullet train, and that includes stops at Nagoya, Kyoto, and other cities. So there's some of the most popular cities in Japan for tourism. And then from Tokyo heading north, you have the Hokuriku Shinkansen, which goes to Kanazawa, is the terminus in the north, stopping at Nagano. So any service leaving Tokyo is going to stop at Nagano. And then from Kanazawa down to Kyoto and Osaka, you don't have a Shinkansen, although one is being built. There will be one shortly. But you have a rapid service called the Limited Express Thunderbird, which is also very, very fast and very comfortable service to use. So it's very easy to move through this area. Very quick and easy, all covered by the Japan Rail Pass. And so we really consider this our home region. And in that area, you have a lot of different prefectures, not just Nagano, but this is really what we consider to be, the kind of center of Japan and the area that we focus on.
I know when we had talked before, feels like just yesterday, Peter, that when we were talking that you, as soon as we were done talking about Osaka, had another location that you had as kind of like a go-to place to visit when not in Nagano. Why don't you go into that now? Because I think that was actually how I reached out and touched base to you, and it wasn't for Nagano. So go ahead and share.
I'm glad you asked. So it's 2 hours north. It's located in Ishikawa Prefecture, part of central Japan. You have a very lovely city called Kanazawa. So Kanazawa is very easy to get to from Tokyo because, as I mentioned, the Hokuriku Shinkansen runs from Tokyo via Nagano and stops at Kanazawa. But it's also easy to get to from Osaka and Kyoto thanks to the service I mentioned, the Thunderbird service that runs up to Kanazawa. Kanazawa is located very close to the north coast. It's a very interesting historic city, but also it's a fantastic city, a nice blend of historic and modern attractions. It's quite a small city, so it's the kind of city you can explore on foot, which is really lovely. A similar atmosphere to Kyoto, but much smaller than Kyoto. Anyone who's been to Kyoto knows that Kyoto is actually quite a large city. So while Kyoto certainly should be on your list to see, it's fantastic. Kyoto is, you're going to be using, when you visit Kyoto, you'll probably be using the buses to move around between the sites. Kanazawa is much more compact, so you can do it on foot if you like. It was one of the wealthiest cities in Japan during the Edo period, which was the 17th century to the 19th century, that period that was really considered the height of Japanese culture. So you've got very beautiful historic areas. For example, there's a very beautiful castle there. You have a garden, considered one of Japan's most beautiful gardens is located right next to the castle. There's beautifully preserved samurai districts. the tea house district, things like this. And as I said, the real beauty of Kanazawa is it all can be reached on foot. You can walk yourself around to and from Kanazawa Station. But in combination with that, you have some fantastic galleries and museums. So there's a nice blend of the historic to the modern, and being located to the close to the north coast, it's no surprise that there's an excellent fish market in the center of the city, and you're going to get lots of restaurants throughout Kanazawa serving fantastic menus, particularly seafood. So Kanazawa to me is a real. It's one of those cities. I'm sure everybody's heard of Osaka, but Kanazawa is one of those ones that you might not have heard of. And when you look at the map and you're planning, how do I get from Tokyo to Kyoto, Osaka, or from Osaka, Kyoto to Tokyo, most people just look at the Tokaido Shinkansen that runs along the Pacific coast, and they're going to do it that way. But if you look at the map, you're going to see the Shinkansen running up past Nagano, up to Kanazawa, and then the train line coming back down from the north to Kyoto and Osaka. And I think that's a fantastic way to explore this region. So Kanazawa should definitely be on your list of go-to cities.
I love it, and I feel like one of our travel hacks for our question coming up here is just kind of some of your favorite travel hacks for Japan. One of those is going to be just that JRL pass
Yes.
as a whole, just allowing you to get through. But I know you have some more things to share with the listeners, and intrigued to see what you're going to add on, my friend.
Yeah, sure. Very quickly, yes. I'm sure other guests on your podcast have talked about the JR passes. Japan Rail offers a range of passes to inbound and also to foreign residents of Japan. There is the full Japan Rail Pass that it covers the entire country. It covers all the Shinkansen lines throughout Japan. A couple of them, there's some services that you can't use on the pass, but actually very, very conveniently, in terms of coming up to Nagano on the Hokuriku Shinkansen, all services are covered by the pass. But there's also a series of regional passes that foreign residents are also eligible. I think it's now up to 10 or 12 different regional passes that we can get. The regional passes are notably cheaper than the full pass. So if you look at the cost of the full pass and you think it's pretty expensive, well, firstly, if you're going to be using the Shinkansen more than 3 or 4 times, you're going to get your money back. So the full pass is probably worth it. But if you're only planning to use the Shinkansen maybe a handful of times, one of the regional passes might be worthwhile. So for example, our region is covered by the JR East Pass. It covers the Niigata and Nagano, and there's 2 Shinkansen lines. That's the Hokuriku line that comes to us and the Joetsu line that goes to Niigata. And then lots of regional lines, including rapid services. So that pass is only around, I think, 18,000 yen. Now, if you consider that the cost of the Shinkansen to and from Tokyo to Nagano is about 16,000 yen, you can see straight away you've almost got the cost of the pass covered. If you were to go to Kanazawa, off the top of my head, I can't say what the cost of the train to Kanazawa is, but the pass will be cheaper. So those passes are really worthwhile, whether you're visiting from overseas or if you're in Japan and you're eligible. Really worth doing it. The other hack I'd say is consider, if you can, when you come to Japan. So very interestingly, for inbound, the most popular month to visit Japan is August, which is the height of summer. Now, for anyone who's been to Japan in August, you're going to know it's going to be extremely hot and very, very humid. Now, to the point that it can actually affect your travel experience. I've had plenty of guests on my tours in the middle of summer that are coming up to Nagano to escape the heat, which is a great option. But they're really struggling because they're from countries that don't get that hot. Japan gets up to around 40 degrees Celsius in the summer, which is about 110 Fahrenheit, I think, and extremely humid. So it can really be taxing and it can really affect what you do. So I'd say, if possible, try to avoid the height of summer. But if you are here in July to August, get out of the cities. The humidity and the heat is going to be at its worst in the coastal cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and that's a great reason to try to attract you up to this area, Nagano. So Nagano is a place of mountains and a higher elevation. So while it's still hot and humid up here, the humidity is far less. The evening temperature is usually pretty nice, so once the sun goes down, you can get a decent sleep. But if you go properly up into the mountains here, the mountains in Nagano go up to over 3,000 meters in height, the humidity just disappears. And so the temperature is lovely. And you've got some of Japan's best alpine hiking up here in Nagano. So I'd encourage you to really look at that. Destinations like Kamikochi or Tateyama Kurobe, Shikukogen, these things. Lots of information on our website about that if you're interested. The other thing I'd say in terms of timing is consider coming in June. Now, June is the real low season for inbound travel to Japan because it's Japan's rainy season, and people are kind of avoid it because of the weather. I really like it because the heat and the humidity hasn't really come on at that stage, so it's usually very comfortable. I like the atmosphere created by the rains. The Japanese rainy season is not like Southeast Asia; it's not as heavy as that, so it's not going to dramatically impact on your travel experience. But the real advantage as a traveler is hotels and accommodation is cheap and empty at that time because even Japanese avoid traveling at that time. So, especially if you're budget conscious or you just want to open up some good options, I think June is a really good time to come across.
And I got to tell you, that was one of my things. I'm glad you mentioned that because one of my favorite experiences that I had in Japan was in Nakura. I ended up going to a glass studio, and it was up in the mountains, and it was a Karazawa Glass Studio, and I got to tell you, the heat had gotten to me. The number of people that were around me had gotten to me. And just that breath of fresh air, having some space, the humidity dropping as much as it did, made it seem like it was 30 degrees less than that, but in a good way, not like freezing in need of coat. But I think that is definitely a great travel hack. And then those regional passes, it's easy to just begin to think I need to buy this whole thing. But depending on what you're doing and where you're going and when you move, you don't have to have it be the whole time. And if it's the difference between you getting to adventure out or staying in one spot, there's so many different options for you for that.
Yeah,
and I love it.
Yeah, one thing on the passes actually it's also worth mentioning. Obviously, I think people are going to be drawn to them by the cost of the Shinkansen. The Shinkansen is expensive,
Yes.
and so the pass, as I said, really, even though the initial outlay for the pass can seem like a lot, if you're going to be using the Shinkansen in particular more than a handful of times, you're going to get your money back. But it's also worth mentioning that those passes cover most train lines in those regions, and so don't feel like you're limited to the Shinkansen. Look at the regional lines. The regional lines will take you into some really beautiful areas. So there's no Shinkansen running directly through our area because of the mountains, but you've got very beautiful train lines running up into the mountains. And so you have both local and rapid services. And these are some of the best ways to travel through Japan. Shinkansen is, a fantastic experience. It's got to be done at least once. But Shinkansen is really all about getting from A to B. And so quite often they're on elevated tracks behind concrete barriers and you may not be able to see much. If you get onto the more local lines, they often, particularly through the mountains, they're going to follow rivers through the mountains. So you get some truly spectacular landscapes. Even the little local trains in Japan, they're really comfortable, spotlessly clean. They usually have a bathroom on board, really comfortable seating. And so it's a great way to travel. So I encourage you to, any listener, to not just feel like they're restricted to the Shinkansen, get onto those local lines and use them. And one more thing to mention about the passes, JR also operate rental car services, usually from any major train station. We'll have a rental car right at the train station. And if you have the JR pass, you get a discount on using their rental cars. Another great way to explore, particularly the regional areas of Japan.
That's huge. I mean, that really is something that could be of huge service just in general to be able to explore and see some different things that are having. Peter, if it's not, sooner than later, if it's not me having to wait till I retire to make my move out to Japan full time, I'll definitely be reaching out because he pretty much convinced me, I need to live the life of a tour guide at some point in my life. So
we're always looking for new guides. So if you make that move, you let us know.
Part of why I was hired, Peter, was because I was tall for my teaching position, and I was able to get the boxes that they needed for holidays and things like that off of shelves that they weren't able to. So I can bring my height to service, as well. So
height's good. Anything that makes you stand out as a guide. So if you lose the guests, they don't lose you. So height is always good.
I like that. And just in general, Peter, let's say somebody is overseas right now. I know we'll talk a little bit more, but a little bit later about, moving and things or recommendations you have. What advice could you give to someone who's looking for employment with your company or one that's similar to yours, in Japan?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question, isn't it? So I think let me start with if you're looking specifically to join a company like ours. Yeah, so we are a tour company and travel agent. So obviously, our whole business is inbound tourism and also increasingly providing services to foreign residents of Japan. So I think succeeding in this industry really depends on an ability to continue to innovate, not to sit still and just assume that because one of your tours is popular, it's going to continue to be popular. Travel tastes really change quickly. And I think we're going to see that coming out of once the border opens after COVID. I'm really curious to see what travel looks like. What changes will have happened? Because I think 2 to 3 years in tourism is always a long time, but especially with what we've been facing, I think you've seen the development of a lot of travel apps, language apps that are maybe going to give more independence and change what people are looking for. I also think there's a big difference between the way the younger generation travels, what they value and prioritize with their travel, to how older people travel. And when I say that, I include you and me, Michael. I think you and I are a similar age. And so I think there's a big gap between our age and the younger generation, and primarily because I think because of the internet. You and I grew up in a world without it, and so we remember those days. And I think the way that we consume or we research our information, what we prioritize, is probably different to the way the younger generation does it. So if you're really starting out on your career and you're looking to get into tourism and you're a younger person, I think that you potentially can bring some real knowledge and something new to the company. And that's what I'd be looking for, is that if somebody is approaching us with maybe not that much experience, but they're keen to get into it, what are they bringing to us that we don't already have? And I think if you are a younger person, you're going to have a good understanding, hopefully, of the way younger people travel and how they arrange their travel, how they research it, and what they prioritize. So I look at, what can you bring to the company that they don't already have? That's a great way to take the first step. In terms of working in Japan itself, Japan is not it's a developed country. It's a very developed country, but it's not a Western country. So if you're going to work here, you have to accept that the work environment is slightly different to what you're probably used to if you're coming from Australia, the United States, or Europe. And while I think you don't have to totally conform to it, and I think any good company, like this company that I work for, is a Japanese company, but with a very international outlook. So I don't feel like I have to totally conform to the Japanese lifestyle, because they recognize that what I'm bringing is a different set of experiences and background, and they let me be who I am. But at the same time, you need to realize it is Japan, and the work environment is quite different. So it starts with very basic things like punctuality. I mean, in Japan, being on time is being 10 minutes early. That's going to be a big thing, but it extends to how you relate to your colleagues, how you converse with colleagues, clients, and partners is very important. How you build those relationships. Relationships in Japan typically take time, a bit more time than possibly you'd be used to in the United States or Australia or similar countries. Things like salary and salary progression, again, they work a bit differently, and something that you just need to accept and just take your time to get used to it. If you're looking to move here, if you're from outside of Japan and with no experience at all in Japan, I think it's quite challenging to find a job, because Japanese are all about the face-to-face. So to find an employer who will hire you from overseas with possibly not having met you face-to-face is quite challenging. And your best option is probably going to be look at something like teaching English. So there's lots of English teaching jobs in Japan. Some of them pay quite well. And usually all you need to have is that you are a native English speaker or fluent in English. Usually they're going to want to see a bachelor's degree. And really that's the only prerequisite. After that, it's all about your personality and what you bring to the company. So even though your interest might be something else, maybe not long term to teach English, it is a good way to get into Japan, get established, and then shop around for other options.
I think that's great, Peter. And, probably can bring a wide variety of things and possibly more than just my paper map that I still bring from 2004 for different locations, because I'm paranoid that the whole cell service is going to fail me at some point in time, but I'll still have that map to get around.
Yeah, I think you and I are cut from the same mold. I'm the kind of guy who still opens the car door when he's reversing to look behind because I don't trust the camera. So, I think you and I are very similar. So.
I got to thank you again for all of your repeated attempts to make sure that we're getting all of this information out to the listeners today. So
No problem.
When we were connecting back together, you brought up a pretty interesting add-on to things outside of Nagano and Osaka too. Do you mind go ahead and sharing that with the listeners now, because it was super interesting. So let's just go ahead and tack a little addendum onto that. What to do when you're not in Nagano?
Yeah, no problem at all. So as I was saying, in terms of recommending areas to go, rather than just kind of repeat areas about, similar to Nagano, I thought listeners might be interested to hear of some cities that I really enjoy, and one being Osaka. Osaka is pretty well known, and I imagine it's on the itinerary of many travelers already. Another city which is less well known but really worth spending time in is Kanazawa. So Kanazawa is located in Ishikawa Prefecture, which is also in central Japan, but to the northwest of Nagano and on the north coast. Kanazawa is very easy to reach from Osaka because there is a limited express service which runs from Osaka through Kyoto up to Kanazawa called the Thunderbird. But so it's not a Shinkansen, but it's also extremely fast. And then Kanazawa Station is the terminus of the Hokuriku Shinkansen, which runs from Tokyo to Nagano and ends at Kanazawa. So Kanazawa is a really easy city to get to. It's a very beautiful city. So in Japan, during the Edo period, which was the 17th century to 19th century, Kanazawa was one of the richest cities in Japan. Very powerful clan was based there. And so today you have a really beautiful historic city, including the castle, really well-preserved samurai districts, the tea house districts, which are again very, very beautiful. And you have a very thriving modern city of fantastic museums and galleries. Being located on the coast, it has a fantastic seafood market and great seafood in the city, great shopping, great nightlife, everything. So Kanazawa is a city which maybe people haven't heard of, or maybe they have heard of it but aren't sure whether to spend time. Maybe they're just going to transit past it as they go to and from Tokyo through Nagano on to the north coast. But I really recommend staying there. Kanazawa puts you within easy reaching distance of Shirakawa-go, which I'm sure you would have covered before on your podcast. Shirakawa-go is the World Heritage Villages up in the mountains with the thatched roof houses. You can reach Shirakawa-go from Kanazawa with about an hour by bus, and you can then go on to Takayama and into the mountains and approach Nagano going across the mountains. So I would really recommend if travelers have time to prioritize stopping there. It's a very beautiful city. It's not big, so you can walk around. A really pleasant city to spend time in, and we get there every chance we can.
And it's funny because that's how I ended up stumbling across your site and all the different resources you had. And it was like funny, like you said, you pulled up in a search for something that wasn't Nagano, but I'm glad that it appeared on my computer because it got us talking together today. So it's like I like it. I like it.
Yeah, no, so I really, if you have the chance, I really recommend spending time there. A couple of nights is really worthwhile.
That's wonderful. And if for you as a whole, I know you said with all of the snow and ski resorts that are in your area, I'm sure it's part of your Japan interest, but what are your biggest interest with Japan?
Oh, okay. Well, in terms of, so living in Nagano, I think you'd be crazy if you didn't take advantage of the ski resorts. I said Nagano has around 80 ski resorts. A lot of those are quite small. So ski resorts in Japan are typically much smaller than they are in the United States or Europe. So a large resort in Japan would be around a medium-sized resort in the United States or Europe. But Nagano has around 80 ski resorts, of which I'd say there are around 20, which are really of interest to foreign visitors, including the largest ski resort in Japan, which is Shikokogen. So Shikokogen is actually right next to the Monkey Park. Monkey Park is in the foothills of a large national park in which the ski resort is sitting. So that's in winter. That's what I'm all about. Is as much as possible in between tours and being busy with work, getting out and snowboarding at the resorts here. It's also a large part of our business is bringing people to the resorts and arranging their travel packages. Outside of winter, those mountains are just as big. So we spend a lot of time up in the mountains just going for walks through forests and taking advantage of the really beautiful open areas around us. As I'm sure you're aware, Michael, you've been to Japan before. The Japanese summer can be quite unforgiving, very hot and humid.
No doubt.
So getting into the mountains is a great option if you really want to escape that heat. I mean, it's still going to be warm in the mountains, but the humidity really dissipates. And so a lot of our summers, again, spent in those same mountains, just walking, enjoying really beautiful side of Japan.
And I got to tell you, some of my favorite instances have been in those same mountains. And it's a drastic difference. Just cutting out that humidity is a huge quality of life increase for everybody involved. So
I couldn't agree more.
Like if you're like me, that you're stuck to June and July for visiting, that's probably... Because one of the questions coming up was a favorite travel hack for Japan, but I think that might count that might count it right there.
Well, I think you've guessed what my first recommendation is actually in terms of travel hacks. It's exactly that.
And then Peter, do you have any other kind of like travel recommendations or things like that you might share with listeners as well? Because that's a great one.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, and it was actually the first thing I was going to mention. So, kind of surprisingly, I was a little bit surprised when I learned this a few years ago that the busiest month for inbound tourism to Japan is August. Now, if you were to ask me, is there any time of year to avoid coming to Japan? I would say August, because August is the peak of summer. Now, the Japanese summers can be very hot. Now, you often, and increasingly so year on year, you get temperatures approaching around 40 degrees Celsius, which I think is about 110 Fahrenheit, maybe higher. So it's quite hot, and the humidity can be intense. Now, that's most acutely felt in the coastal cities like Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, and it can really affect the quality of your travel experience. I have a lot of guests on tours through that time of year who are kind of struggle, especially if you're from a country where it doesn't get that hot or if you don't have the humidity. So what I'd say is if you have the ability to be flexible with your travel dates, I would avoid the height of summer, which is July to August.
I agree with you.
If you are here at that time, then head towards central Japan and up into the mountains. Obviously, the higher you go, the less the humidity is going to affect impact on your travel. So as I said, if you come to Nagano and into the mountains, it'll still be warm up there, but it'll be really pleasant warmth, and the humidity won't be a factor once you get into the mountains. So if you are here in August, I'd say prioritize coming up to areas like Nagano and the surrounding prefectures of regional Japan and into the mountains. And if you go to our website, we've got a lot of great information about exactly which destinations we recommend to go into the mountains. The other thing I'd say is another kind of travel hack I would suggest to travelers is I think June is a really good time to visit. Now, June is really low season in Japan because it's rainy season. And so at that time, there's not much international travel, tourism into Japan, but also Japanese tend to avoid it for their travel. Therefore, accommodation is really open and available. Prices will probably be notably cheaper than it will be certainly in summer. And so it's going to be a lot cheaper to travel around Japan. You get some really good deals, I think, on local accommodation. But also, if you're in an area like this, I think the rainy season only adds to the atmosphere of areas in the mountains. You get the really beautiful mist coming through, and it's a really pleasurable time to walk through the mountains and enjoy destinations that will be pretty quiet and empty of people. So that would be another one.
I like that, and I would agree with you. My favorite time that I visited has been like November. I loved being out there and seeing all the leaves change, and the temperature was perfect. And when we were talking earlier about the Shinto religion and being some of those sites, the Buddhist sites, the Shinto sites, and having that connection and everything that's there, like, still gives me goosebumps just thinking about that time. But I would agree with you. Like, June is usually when I end up going, and although you run the risk of rain and other things, it's here more often than not. Like, we've had wonderful experiences and some pretty big deals as far as lodging and stuff as a result. So pluses and minuses for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think, yeah, I mean, the rainy season here, it's not as extreme as you're going to get in countries like Southeast Asia. It's something to factor in, but it really the weather is nice and warm at that time. It limits the humidity, which is nice. But I said the real advantage is things are quiet. The final thing I'd like to say is just that in terms of travel tips to Japan, I think most people who come here are going to look into getting one of the rail passes, either the full Japan Rail Pass or one of the regional passes. They're really worthwhile. So I'm sure people are aware of the option, but of the full pass. While they might seem expensive at the outset, it's going to save you a lot of money if you plan to use the trains, especially the Shinkansen, more than 2 or 3 times. You're probably going to get your money back on that pass. But the regional passes, for example, Japan Rail does a regional pass for East Japan. Which covers, there are 2 different passes, but the one that covers our region covers Nagano and Niigata, which covers 2 Shinkansen lines, the Hokuriku Shinkansen and the Joetsu, and you can use them as much as you like. I can't remember the exact cost. It's less than 20,000. But basically, if you take the Shinkansen from Tokyo to Nagano to return, you've basically already covered the cost of the pass. So, for example, if you're going to go from Tokyo to Kanazawa back to Tokyo, the pass is going to be cheaper than buying a return ticket. So I would really encourage people to look at the JR passes, especially the regional passes, if you're kind of conscious of the cost, because the regional passes are notably cheaper. And then once you have them, don't just look at the Shinkansen lines. The Shinkansen lines are fantastic from getting to A to B, and it's got to be experienced. It's part of the whole experience of coming to Japan. But also look at the regional lines. The limited express services, I mentioned one earlier that runs from Osaka to Kanazawa called the Limited Express Thunderbird. They're also extremely fast. They're very, very comfortable, and they're all going to be covered by the JR passes. Unlike the Shinkansen is often raised off the ground and you're behind concrete barriers because it's a separate track. So often in the Shinkansen, you can't see a lot. But on the regional lines, you're going to see, you're going to get some beautiful views of the countryside you're passing through, and they're also very fast. So I would really encourage people to look at the regional lines, both limited express and local, because they're going to get you to some fantastic places, and it will certainly open up more of the mountainous interior of Japan. The Shinkansens tend to go around rather than go through. If you get onto those local lines, you're going to get into some beautiful areas and discover things that you might otherwise not have.
I love it. And that's a good point. Every time we find something new, and those regional passes, having that option is definitely something good to hear as well. And one thing that I always like to ask is any advice you might have to give to someone who's looking for employment with a company like yours, or similar to that, or with yours, if that's something, somebody who's looking to come to Japan or has interests similar to yours. What are some recommendations you might give to somebody who is, looking to begin that adventure you've already started yourself?
Yeah, I think obviously the big challenge for any career is, I guess, taking that first step, getting that first job. So if you wanted to go directly into tourism, especially tourism in Japan, I think it's the same as tourism in any country, really. Tourism is always changing. And so I think the ability to succeed in the industry is to kind of look ahead. You can't just be thinking of, the next peak season. You need to be thinking 2, 3, 5 years down the track. What is tourism going to look like? What are people prioritizing, and moving yourself into that space? Hopefully, not just following the trends, but actually being involved in the creation of new trends. I think that's especially true at the moment, and I'm really curious to see what tourism looks like after inbound comes back. I think there's a big generation gap, Michael. So I get the impression, Michael, you and I a similar age in our 40s.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think you and I grew up in a world pre-internet. We remember those days well. But I think there's a big gap between our age and the younger generation. The generation that has always had internet as part of their life. I think they travel in a different way. They prioritize different things, and they're much more savvy with tech in general than old blokes like you and I are. So what I would say is if you're looking to start off your career in tourism, especially if you're a bit younger, consider what you can bring to a company that they might not already know. So one of the things that I think that we do well is that we recognize the things that we know that we do well, but we also recognize that what we maybe don't know as well, and where we need to involve some other people. So if we were looking at somebody approaching our company who's a bit younger, and starting up, looking to start their career, I'd be looking to see somebody who brings something to the company that we don't already have. And there's a big advantage there if you are younger, that you're probably aware of things in terms of travel trends, what's important to younger people in traveling, and what they make their travel decisions based on. That if you can bring that to a company, it's really attractive. The other thing I'd say is if you're looking to work specifically in Japan, regardless of whether it's in tourism or teaching English or any other industry, is that Japan has its own set of work expectations that I'm sure people are aware of. The reputation. Japan has a reputation for having a very distinct work culture. The company that I work in is a Japanese company, but with a strong international outlook. And so it's a very comfortable workspace for me. But even so, it comes with certain realities in terms of expectations of how Japanese work culture operates, starting with very basic things like punctuality. In terms of Japanese, have a very strict sense of what counts as being on time and not on time. The days that you work, flexibility with your work days, salary and salary progression, which is quite different to I think Western cultures. Relationships within the company, relationships with your clients and partner organizations. All of this stuff is really important. So I'd be looking, if I were an employer looking to take somebody on, I'd be making an assessment on the person's ability to kind of work within the Japanese system. So I think you need to be prepared for that. But if you're looking to move here from outside of Japan and you have no experience in Japan, Japanese really value face-to-face. So I think finding employment from outside of Japan without ever actually meeting the employer is quite challenging. I think the most convenient avenue in for people coming from Western countries is going to be teaching English, which I'm sure you've probably discussed on your podcast before. A lot of those positions will recruit directly from overseas. Typically, all you need is a bachelor's degree, and you can find some work here. And I would look at the regional areas. A lot of people understandably want to go straight to the big cities, Tokyo, Osaka, but the pay for those jobs tends to be fairly standard, and that the pay in might equate to a fairly limited lifestyle in a large city, but might open up a lot more options in a rural Japan where the lifestyle is notably cheaper. So, my advice would be if you're looking to move to Japan but you haven't lived here before, would be to focus firstly on getting any work that can bring you in, bring yourself in, acclimatize, maybe get your Japanese language up to speed, and then you can really shop around for maybe something that you're more interested in.
That sounds great. And with that, I think kind of as a nice transition over to kind of like the services and that you offer with Snow Monkey Resorts in Nagano. If you could go ahead and tell us a little bit about what Snow Monkey tours and like resorts has to offer.
Yeah, no problem. So as I mentioned, our company began in 2014, based in and around the Snow Monkey Park. So the Snow Monkey Park in Japanese is referred to Jigukudani Yan Koen. Jigukudani is the name of the area, and Yan Koen means Wild Monkey Park. So it's around 50 minutes outside of Nagano City, very easy to access by car or public transport. Now, the park itself is home to a fairly unique troop of monkeys. So this is the only troop of monkeys in the world who are known to naturally bathe in the hot springs. So hot springs in Japan, natural hot springs, are referred to as onsen. It's a bit of a long story how this came to occur, but the monkeys, quite some time ago, in the 60s and 70s, ended up living in this area in the foothills of this national park. And once in this area, they observed humans. using onsens, and they began to copy the behavior for themselves. So, as they say, monkey see, monkey do, right? So this is a prime example of it. And ever since then, it's been a popular tourist destination. The park isn't actually there for tourists. It's there as a conservation and research facility, but just that we are welcome to visit to see this very unique sight of the monkeys bathing in the onsen. It's a really good experience because the monkeys are wild, so there's nothing keeping them in the park. They come and go as they please. So they leave in the evening and they come back the next day, and with pretty firm regularity. There's no barriers in the park. So when you walk through the park, the monkeys come right up to you. You're not allowed to touch them or interfere with them in any way, but they're not afraid of humans. So they're going to walk up to you. They literally will run between your legs. So it's a rare opportunity to get so close to wild monkeys. And being Japanese, these monkeys are very respectful of your space and your things. They're not going to give you a hard time. So it's a really fantastic experience. That's our company began by taking tours, small groups, into the monkey park. And we do that in combination with other activities. So most people who want to see the monkeys are going to dedicate a day to do it. And typically at the monkey park, you need 2 to 3 hours. Obviously, it's not a whole day experience for most people. So our tours combine the monkey park with other activities in and around Nagano and other areas. We have a range of group tours that operate in all season. Winter is our peak, but our tours operate all year round. And we have certain tours that operate every month of the year, and certain tours that only operate in certain seasons, whether it's winter, spring, summer, or autumn. And over the course of the year, over the years, I've been working with the company since 2017. Our scope has expanded well outside of the park now to where we cover not just Nagano, but surrounding prefectures of central Japan. And we have tours to all many different destinations. And the best place to find that information as to exactly where we go is on our website. If you go onto snowmonkeyresorts.com and just click on the tours tab, you're going to get a long list of what we offer. So group tours and private. So we offer both group and private, which we can customize to your interests, your itinerary. For example, pick you up at the station, drop you at your accommodation. We can package those tours with your accommodation or anything that you might need while you're here. We're a registered travel agent, so we can arrange all of that for you. And as I think we're going to, as you mentioned before, we have both. We have Japanese, English, and Chinese-speaking staff. We provide really good support to any of our guests, so we're going to respond to you very, very quickly. And unlike a lot of operators, we're not seasonal. A lot of operators in Nagano will just focus on the winter. So maybe if you're coming here outside of winter are not operating, or possibly not responding to you as fast as you might like, we operate 365 days a year. So we're going to get back to you really quickly and hopefully entice you to come up and visit us.
And that was one of the things I noticed too that also caught my attention was that multiple language support, because we have listeners that are from different places, and that's a huge plus just to be able to offer someone to be able to experience that. And one thing I'd like to ask is, we've talked about the JRL Pass as a whole for those traveling from overseas, but we do have some listeners from within Japan as well. What would be some recommendations for them to kind of help them get out to where you are and experience Nagano and all that it has to offer?
Yeah, so I guess if you're listening from inside of Japan, the first thing to mention is that quite generously now, or quite fortunately, I should say, that the government has now extended the eligibility for many of the passes to foreign residents. So we're still not eligible to use the full Japan Rail Pass, but most of the regional passes we can now use, which are really great value. So if you are here and you're not aware of that, take a look at the Japan Rail website, because it tells you which passes that we are eligible for. And I think it really represents, especially because, if you're living in Japan, it's likely you're going to be traveling on your weekends. And so maybe you're doing a 2 or 3 day trip, unlike an inbound tourist who might be here for 2 or 3 weeks, and therefore the full pass is really attractive. If you're only traveling for 2 or 3 days, the regional passes offer some really good deals and to save you a lot of money. Same thing for anyone living here is to look at the regional lines as much as you look at the Shinkansen. It's going to take you into some really beautiful areas, and those trains are also very, very fast. Even the local ones that run slow, really comfortable, really nice. And they can take you, especially in our region, a lot of the train lines will follow the rivers through the mountains. So really spectacular. I'd look at that. I guess one thing that we focused a lot during COVID with the absence of inbound is actually really refining our services and our travel products so they're of interest to foreign residents of Japan. So maybe if you're a foreign resident and you're wondering, why would I need to book a tour? We actually find that a lot of our guests, well, obviously all of our guests right now are foreign residents, and they get just as much out of the tour as our inbound guests. I think one thing that we focus on with our tours is presenting the information in a really engaging way that a foreign kind of audience can understand and relate to. So if you look at for example, our tours that go to the temple, Zenkoji Temple. So Nagano is home to one of the oldest and most important Buddhist temples in Japan. And it's actually our most popular tour. It combines a visit to the temple with monkeys and lunch and some sake testing. And some people might wonder, well, why would I want to book if I live here, why would I want to book a guide to take me to these places? Our tours are designed to actually really unlock these experiences in a really engaging, family-friendly way. And we find that actually our guests take as much out from the visits to the temple as they do from the monkeys. And this applies to inbound as well. So I think that if you are here and you are considering, coming up to this region, booking a tour is a great way just to save yourself the time of having to the transport, arranging everything, and kind of picking which restaurant to go to. That's all taken care of for you, and it's done in a way that I think you're going to get more out of the experience of whatever the destination is that we're taking you to.
I like that, and it is. I'm finding, especially when you're off the beaten path, people's level of comfort can increase so much so just by having that guide, with them to make sure that they're getting where they need to be and getting the most out of that time. That's fantastic. And for you as well, like traveling through, what are some of the favorite activities that people reach out to you? You said the temple, you've talked about our snow monkeys, but what are some other activities that you offer that are going to make someone want to kind of have that return trip to Nagano as well? Or maybe on a return trip, they see, maybe I want to do 2 days as opposed to one, or what are some things in that regard?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people approach us, obviously, given the name of our company and our focus on the monkeys. That's for many people, that's the way they discover us. But then once they come onto our website, one thing that they realize is the monkeys, the name is a bit misleading, isn't it? The snow monkeys. And the monkeys are there all year round. They're just as comfortable in the snow as they are in the heat and humidity of summer, and that's what they're most famous for. But the monkeys are there all year round, and each season gives its own reasons to visit the parks. Obviously, winter being the most popular, it's the most likely time you'll see them in the onsen. The park is buried in deep snow, so it's really fantastic and interesting time to visit the park. But then when spring comes, spring brings the blossoms and the baby monkeys. So the monkeys have their babies usually from late April through to June, and mothers will disappear into the mountains for about a week before they come back into the park with the baby. And pretty quickly, they give their baby a lot of freedom, and you can get, giving them the space that they need, you will get quite close to them. So it's a really fantastic, and that's actually my favorite time of year to take guests into the park. In summer, the park is very lush and green, and it offers, a nice escape from that heat and humidity that we mentioned. Before autumn, which is probably the most beautiful time of year, as you mentioned, Michael, with the forest leaves are changing. You have the first snow on the mountains, and so it's just a really spectacular time of year to be up there. Once onto our website, though, I think what people discover is that the range of things that we do that are not monkey related, and that Nagano offers just as much outside of winter that it does in winter. And as I said, usually it's related to the mountains. So for example, right now, we're getting towards the end of May. We've been taking guests up to a destination that I think is one of the best destinations in Japan, called the Tateyama Kurobe Alpine Route. You may have heard of that. It's a series of mountain transports that takes you up into Japan's highest mountain range. Takes you up to about 2,400 meters, just a little bit higher, and in the shadow of the summit of one of Japan's most sacred mountains called Mount Tateyama. where the listeners might have seen images of this is the immense snow walls. So this area is inaccessible during winter due to the snowfall. And toward the end of winter, some much tougher people than me go up there and carve out the walls, carve out a route through the snow. And this year's walls, at the beginning, when the route was opened, measured 18 meters in height.
Wow.
So you might have seen those photographs of buses passing under these immense walls. They almost look like they've been photoshopped. They haven't. That is real. So we that opens in April. From mid-April, that is open. We take guests up there, and that stays open until toward the end of November. So the walls are there until mid-June. The walls are in pretty good condition. After that time, the snow will totally melt, but then it opens up some of Japan's best alpine hiking, and we have a tour that goes up there to do some walking in the summer. Really fantastic destination. Another one that if you look at our website now, you'll see is Kamikochi. So Kamikochi is located about 2.5 hours from Nagano, closer to Matsumoto City than Nagano City. But Kamikochi is another destination which is closed during winter because of the amount of snow. It opens also from mid-April and stays open to mid-November. We have some tours that take people up there for some very, very leisurely walking. So Kamikochi is a alpine valley located between 1,400 and 1,600 meters, with the mountains above going to over 3,100. So it's very spectacular views of Japan's third tallest mountain, Mount Hotaka. And we go up there and do that tour in combination with destinations like Matsumoto Castle, which is one of the most beautiful and one of the few remaining original castles in Japan, or some more local experiences like wasabi picking at wasabi farms and things like that. And so that's, without boring you too much with everything that we do, we have seasonal tours running throughout the year, including cherry blossoms, matsuri, which are the local festivals, fireworks festivals, and special events, and other tours that keep us busy throughout the year. So hopefully, again, people come there to discover the monkeys and then discover a whole lot more about Nagano. And most of our tours we can combine onto multi-day tours, and we can package that with accommodation if that's something you're interested in.
And I like the fact that, that's part of why I wanted to talk to you today is a lot of people agree in the fact that if you're thinking Nagano, you're thinking Winter Olympics, you're thinking things that are here, you're thinking pictures you've seen, and it's pretty clear that Nagano as a whole has so much to offer year round. And yeah. I think it's huge. And it's something that, when my son and I come, it'd be a nice getaway day from Tokyo, or from those things that are there, just hop our Shinkansen and get a little bit of an escape from temperature, but also just allow to see something that you may not normally get to, and possibly fall in love with it. You never know what part of Japan is going to be the one that you connect with the most. So see as many things as you can. It's really it is.
Absolutely. And it's worth mentioning, actually, all of our tours are designed to coincide with the Shinkansen schedule. So, we hope that if you come and see us, that you choose to stay here for a few nights and explore everything Nagano has to offer. But many of our guests just come here as a day trip because they've got quite tight itineraries. All of our tours, the start and end time coincides with convenient Shinkansen services, meaning that you can leave Tokyo in the morning, come up for the tour, and we'll have you back on the Shinkansen to be back in Tokyo at a reasonable time. And you can just do it as a day trip as well. So many of our visitors just come here as a day trip.
And it's with me, I feel like it's going to be the same case, Peter. Is like when I went to Hiroshima, it was pretty much that. I went to go to the Peace Museum and had a night and took off from there, and kind of made friends that were in the area, fell in love with the area. And it's like each time I come back to Japan, I just keep on extending my time in that area. And I could see something like this being the same thing with Nagano, where it's going to be, you go for that, if it's a day experience or a night, and I could see this being like, well, when I return, I have to come back again, And one thing I wanted to ask is, like, you offer so much for people to do, but one thing I know, at least for me, and I'm sure other people listening, is what restaurants would you direct someone to if they're looking to, make that stay? Because for some people beyond, you may have somebody that comes with a family member or a friend that may not want to see the monkeys. I think they're wrong if they don't go, but maybe they don't want to. What is it that you could tell that person that comes with a restaurant, or the people that they go eat, and now they're like, or they go do all of your activities, they want to get something to eat. What could you recommend that's in your area?
Sure. Well, let's start with the monkey park because I imagine a lot of listeners who are tuning in for this are interested specifically in the monkeys. So the monkey park is located in a onsen village called Kambayashi Onsen. So the same source of water which feeds the onsen in the monkey park is piped down to the town below, where it feeds some some fantastic ryokan. Ryokan are the traditional guest houses, many of which have their own, or in that area, all of them have their own in-house hot springs. So it's using the same source of water as the monkeys. The monkeys haven't bathed in it prior to the water coming down. It's a separate, it's piped down separately, so don't worry about that. But Kambayashi, one thing that people might not think of, the monkeys, they would look at the monkeys and think, it's just a day trip. And certainly that's fine. It can be certainly done as a day trip, and that's one of the reasons that we have our tour. But it's also worth considering staying around there. Kambayashi is one of three hot spring towns surrounding the monkey park. So there's Kambayashi, there's another town called Shibu Onsen, and another town called Yudanaka Onsen. Yudanaka is the town with the nearest train station to the monkey park. But in those three hot spring towns, you have a huge range of accommodation that suits all prices, tastes, and budgets. So I'd encourage people, if they're looking at the monkeys, whether it's on a tour or taking themselves, to consider staying up in that area and really experiencing what onsen culture is all about, which kind of brings me to what else to do in that area. In terms of restaurants, the nearest restaurant to the monkey park, or restaurant cafe, is called Enza Cafe. It's it's probably, only a few moments walk from the trail leading to the park. To get to the park, you have to walk along a 1 mile trail, or 1.6 kilometer trail. It takes about 25 minutes in summer, maybe a little bit longer, 35 minutes in winter. It's a really easy trail. It's completely level. And so anyone of reasonable fitness or mobility can make the walk without a problem. But just outside of that, you have Enza Cafe. Now, Enza Cafe is open every day of the year. Very casual kind of Western style open dining, which is really nice, but serves a menu of both Japanese and Western staples. Good place to sit down and have a meal or have a snack. As I said, the menu varies through the seasons. They do a really good ramen if people are interested in ramen. In summer, they often do summer burgers and things like this. They've got some good craft beers there, and everything that you would need from a cafe. So that's a really good option at the park. So if you're going up there as a group of friends or family, maybe somebody isn't feeling like they want to do the walk up to the monkeys or just not that interested, that's a great place to sit while your family and friends are in the park, and you'll be nearby. They've got outdoor decking. Sit out there, have your coffee, have your beer, have your meal, and you'll enjoy it. Also, nearby the park, there's a really nice restaurant called Hotarate. It's currently closed during COVID. I think it's been refurbished at the moment, but that should be open again for the return of inbound. Hotarate serve a slightly more focused on fine dining experience. The building itself is beautiful. The building is a 160-year-old traditional kominka, a traditional kind of rural mansion that's been converted into a restaurant. They serve a great menu of sushi, wagyu, everything, all those kind of more high-end cuisine that you might be after. So if you're there and you want to get a nice meal while you're at the monkeys, that's another recommendation. But also, it's worth, as I say, considering staying overnight in the area. There's many traditional guest houses up there, and all of those, or most of them, are going to serve traditional kaiseki menus. Kaiseki is a multi-course traditional menu, and kaiseki menus vary greatly because they use seasonal produce to really demonstrate or highlight the tastes and the food culture of the region. So the menu that you get from one season to the next in the same guest house will be very, very different. So that to me is a real highlight if you want to really experience that aspect of Japanese culture, is to stay in one of those guest houses that serves kaiseki and really kind of indulge in that really authentic Japanese experience.
That's outstanding. I mean, there's just so much, again, like you're finding that the area has to offer with fine dining. You have some cafe, you have some various things there. And is there anything else that you might add for listeners that may not expect for when they visit that area around the park?
Yeah, sure. So the monkey park is in a wider area called Yamanochi. Now, Yamanochi takes in a fairly large area of land, includes all those onsen towns that I just mentioned, the park, of course, lots of farmlands, but it extends up into the national park that the monkey park is at the base of. So that national park is called Joshinetsu Kogen. It's from the top of my head, I think it's the fourth largest national park in Japan. Up there, you have the largest ski resort in Japan called Shigakogen. So Shigakogen is not just the largest ski resort in Japan; it's also the highest. So it enjoys Nagano's longest ski season. It can run as long as from late November until the end of April, or even in a really solid year, possibly into May. Most ski resorts in Nagano are going to operate from mid-December, or on a bad year, maybe they're going to be opening around Christmas and running to mid-March or into early April. Shikokogen, as I said, some parts of the resort are going to be open from late November to the end of April. You can basically lock that in, and possibly into May. Now, so I think what people kind of might be the monkeys that they're drawn to. Within easy reach of the monkeys using public buses, you have access to the ski resort. Outside of winter, Shikokogen then offers fantastic alpine hiking, nature and wildlife photography. So the monkeys that you see in the park, as I mentioned, they're wild. So they have a range of many kilometers around the park. So they actually will go back up into the national park, and they come back and down as they please. So if you go into the national park, you're going to see plenty of monkeys. You're going to see other wildlife up there. Best time for that, if you're interested in that, is obviously outside of winter when you can walk around. And so you're looking there around from late May to June, around now when all the trails will be open up, and they're going to stay open until late October into November when the first snows will start to come, and then they'll start to shut things down. But that's really good experience nearby the monkeys. And one thing worth mentioning there is because of that longer ski season in Shikokogen, you have, I think, a quite rare experience around the park where you can go skiing and snowboarding at the ski resort, which is still open at the same time that the blossoms are blooming down around the park. So it's a rare opportunity to enjoy that in Japan. Imagine anywhere in the world where you've got these really wonderful experiences so close to each other, where you can go and see the monkeys, you can see the beautiful cherry blossoms at the same time, and an hour later you can be up in the mountains snowboarding or skiing. It's pretty fantastic.
And for you, like I can say for listeners too, getting as many places as possible for you to escape from is going to be a huge part of your tour. You may be somebody like my son that I feel could stay in Tokyo in the busiest areas his entire visit and have a wonderful time, never feel the need to escape. But one of the things that can occur, especially if you're there not used to traveling for 2 weeks away, and abroad, getting some places when you feel that need to just get out, as many places as possible to do a hike or, get some space to yourself for a little bit is a huge thing. So I think that's a wonderful thing to add on. One more reason to visit Nagano. I love it. So it's I like it. I like it. And for you, I know COVID could be that $1 million answer for things as far as like challenges that are kind of, that you're facing in your current role and the company is facing right now. What is there anything else that you're all looking to tackle, or is it just kind of as everyone is right now, just waiting to find out when is this going to, when is Japan going to open back up and allow for all of us to visit again?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's no surprise, is it, that the biggest question for us is exactly that right now, as to when inbound is going to return. We're hopeful it's going to be very soon. If following the news, the government is taking very tentative steps to opening the border. It's worth saying that the border is open, but it's only open to citizens, foreign residents, and other people like short-term business visitors and international students who are enrolled in Japan. So the real question, I guess, in relevance to the podcast is when does it open to tourism? It's a bit of an unknown, but it's looking like it's going to be sometime, hopefully in some form, from July onwards. And we're therefore hoping that maybe by autumn and winter, we're seeing some real return of inbound. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and actually maybe the bigger question for us, is what tourism is going to look like after COVID is done. Now, I think looking abroad, where other countries are more open than Japan, so there's a nice. We can look at what's happening in other countries, whether the travel trends have changed in those countries. I think from what I can tell, I think COVID has really advanced the process that was already happening with a lot of good travel apps and language apps that are now opening up areas for travel that maybe people didn't feel confident to go into before. And so the question might be, well, what is the role for guided tours then if all these travel apps and language apps that are giving this greater independence? I think they enhance the travel experience. And I think what it does is it puts a premium on high quality tours and a more personalized experience. So that's what we're kind of looking to see is actually how do we now refine our tours that were popular before COVID? How do we refine them after COVID to actually make sure they're still meeting the travel demands of people as they come into Japan? So that's kind of something which we're keeping our eye on and looking forward to that challenge.
I like that, and it's one thing, like especially for myself, like I hope more than anything in the world that if it's not June, as it's looking right now, that after the elections happen in June, like I kind of have this hope, Peter, that they're going to be like, okay, we're elected, we have what we want. Now, like July, we're just going to open it back up and go from there. And that my son still and I, we have that chance end of July to maybe make that trip. But if it's not, and we have to wait that time for summer, for at least us, because again, teaching, I'm only available during the summer. I have another year to save. And adding on the possibility of a guided tour, especially to an area that I may not go to, really, if I've had that additional year to save, that sounds more, even more appealing. So I can get the most out of what I have. So I'm right there with you. And just, I'd like to see it, because is it going to be something where everyone like me who's been saving to go to Japan and continues to save to go to Japan, like, what's that going to look like for all of us when we're there? Like super interesting for it, but it's definitely something, the more I talk to people that offer services like yours, it's definitely something, even though I've been numerous times to Japan, that I actually see myself taking advantage of. And it's not just, I think, something that somebody who's coming for the first time take advantage of, but this could be something as well. Even if you've been numerous times, this is something that's definitely opening my eyes for what you're offering, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one trend that we're seeing with the inquiries, because we are now getting a lot of inquiries and people making bookings for what they hope will be their travel in winter or early next year. We're seeing a lot of interest in high-end accommodation, private tours, and things like this. So that's something certainly that we can cater to. But also, if you're more focused on kind of a mid-range budget or budget travel, that's also something that we can cater to. If you look at our website, you're going to see a large range of accommodation catering to all budgets, and that's something where I think it's good to go through a company like ours who can actually push you, directly towards a guest house that suits your needs. One of the challenges, especially for first-time travelers to Japan, is to consider is when booking accommodation, just be careful to pay attention to the type of room that you're getting. So if you're going to a traditional guest house, that is almost certainly going to include on-floor futon bedding. So it's a rolled-out mattress. Yes. You'll be sleeping on the floor. Now, some people find that doesn't suit them. Especially those who are not accustomed to it, because it feels a little bit different to sleeping in a Western-style bed. But also, a lot of traditional guest houses will have shared bathrooms and bathing facilities, and there won't be any private options at all. If you're looking for that, you're much better to go towards a Western-style hotel or a high-end ryokan. So, as I mentioned, ryokans are the traditional guest houses. They may also have Japanese-style rooms and shared bathing facilities, but they're much more likely to also provide you with a private bathroom in your room and the option of Western beds and things like this. So, I think one service that we can provide, if you're looking to find the right accommodation for your budget or needs, is that we can make sure that you're booking a hotel that's in a good location, but also it's going to cater to what you want. And certainly, if you're looking for, again, in-house restaurants, things like that serve Japanese, but also maybe the option of a Western menu, guest houses that have English or Chinese-speaking staff, again, we can help you find all those things. The final thing to mention, obviously, as we've discussed, winter is our peak season, and people booking for winter, if you are looking to come to Nagano for the skiing and snowboarding this winter, again, we're hopeful things will be open. You really need to be looking about now to be making your bookings, especially for accommodation, or if you are interested in getting private transport or tours. People typically book their holidays around 6 months out, so around June to July, and those bookings are now coming in now. Now it's a bit difficult to make those concrete bookings, isn't it? When we don't know for sure when the border opens, but that's something to consider if you are looking to come for winter. Now is the time to be contacting to make sure you get the accommodation, especially which books out well in advance. So something to think about.
No, that's for sure. And I think that's when you start taking advantage with things kind of up in the air. Having someone with some expertise, especially in that area, just means that much more. It's huge. It's huge. And one thing I'm going to go ahead and ask here, Peter, is kind of like a PSA, I guess, if you have like, oh, if you were gonna talk to somebody who was saying, "Hey, thinking about moving to Japan, thinking about moving to Nagano," what would be some advice that you would give to someone that was thinking about possibly making that move, not only to Japan but to Nagano as an area?
Yeah, well, first I'd say go for it because personally, I think the lifestyle just can't. One of the reasons that we choose to be here, for example, rather than Australia, as much as I love Australia, I miss my family and friends, but I just think the lifestyle in regional Japan is very, very livable. Everybody knows how safe and clean and respectful Japanese culture is. But one thing that they might not be aware of is because Tokyo and these cities have a reputation to be expensive, which they tend to be. There is you can travel cheap through those cities if you want as well. But if they tend to be a little bit more expensive. Regional Japan, there's a really nice lifestyle here where you don't need a lot of money to live well. So I'd say first thing I would say is if you're considering moving to Japan or you're already in Japan, look seriously at Nagano and similar locations because I think the quality of life really is up there. It's really hard to beat. In terms of actually making that move happen, especially if you're coming from abroad, I think that the hardest thing is always going to be to find work. And to find meaningful work in Japan is, as a foreigner, can be really tricky. So realistically, the best option might be something like if you're younger and you have a bachelor's degree, is to look for something like teaching English, but actually nominate that you want to go to a regional area. I think you won't have any problem to find work. Some of those teaching roles are really fantastic. So the bit of teaching that I've done when I lived in Japan when I was a bit younger was in schools, and so always teaching to kids. Now some people might think I don't want to do that, kids are too much effort, and they certainly are a lot of work, but it's also great fun. Speaking personally, the kids wanted to be there. They loved all the aspects of it. It's chaos, but it's actually it's good fun. So I think it's actually a good option to come in, and you might find that that's something that you like and you want to keep doing there, and you won't have any problem finding work in that regard. If you're then looking to or move directly, or you're looking to start with a different company like a tourism. I think you need to look at what skills do you bring to that company. So firstly, language. Language is a really essential part of living here. I think you don't need fluent Japanese to necessarily pick up work. I certainly don't have fluent Japanese, but you need an adequate level to be able to communicate and actually get your point across to people. Especially for things like guiding, you need to be able to have transactional conversations and make things happen, and actually interpret basic conversations between your guest and local people. So I'd say focus on getting your language skills up to speed, and then just shop around, because I think a lot of jobs like the one that I found was it's very much word of mouth sometimes. We are looking to actually take on some new guides as the border opens up, and so if someone is directly interested in working with us, keep an eye on our website. We are likely to advertise once we have a more concrete idea as to when the border will open. We're likely to advertise to take on some new guides. Primarily, we're looking for people who are already in Japan, people who are already in the Nagano area, or looking to relocate. So keep an eye on that. But if anyone's interested, regardless of your situation, if you've listened today and you're interested in what we do and what we're about, feel free to get in contact, and we're more than happy to have a conversation. I certainly understand what it's like to be looking to find work here, and so I'm more than happy to correspond with people and give them every assistance that we can.
Maybe a couple of years, Peter, but I might be, reaching out again.
We're always looking. We're always looking.
uh,
If anyone is considering guiding as a career in Japan or anywhere, I really recommend it. I mean, I really it's a tiring job because some of the days can be quite long, and you've got to be prepared to respond to all types of things. But generally, most guests are really lovely. I really enjoy being part of their experience and really enhancing their experience of Japan. So it's a really rewarding job, and keeps you young, gets you out. So it's good.
I think it sounds like awfully similar to teaching, my friend. 100%.
Yes.
It's like my interaction with the kids every day. It's controlled chaos at times, but they do keep you up to date on the latest trends, and I feel stay young as a result of that too. So
yeah, absolutely. Can I just say one more thing, then, Michael? Just
please do.
Yeah, one other thing. If you are in Japan and you are a similar travel company, or possibly you're a guide living in outside of Nagano, but in the central Japan area, we find that year on year our scope is expanding. As we we began just with the monkeys, and we've over time grown out through all of Nagano and now out into some of the surrounding prefectures. If you're a similar travel company or if you're a guide in one of those regional areas and interested in possibly partnering or working with us, feel free to get in contact. We're always looking for new opportunities. And so we'd be very happy to have a chat with anyone who's in the area and looking to work with us or in partnership with us, even if they're not in Nagano itself. So feel free to get in touch, and we'd be very happy to have a chat.
Thank you so much for staying with up until this time. Is there anything that you'd like to add and share that we maybe haven't talked about to this point with listeners of the show?
Yeah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. I apologize for all the issues we've had trying to get the recording to work, but hopefully it all comes out at the business end and everyone can enjoy it. Just two things I would say. Firstly, when you come to Japan, if you're a first-time visitor, you've never been before, one thing I see through my tours and talking to guests, many of whom, it's their third, fourth, fifth, 10th time in Japan, people love it, is that it might take one visit here to realize that don't worry about language. Obviously, most people visiting here are not going to speak Japanese. If you can pick up a few basic phrases before you come, I think Japanese really appreciate it. Because most Japanese, or all Japanese, learn English all through school. And so you might get the impression that they don't speak English. It's not that they don't, it's that they sometimes don't have confidence to speak it, even though their English might be quite good. So don't worry about that, because you're always going to find someone that can communicate and you can get your point across, and you'll be able to get somebody to assist. But also, it's a country where nothing is going to go wrong. You're not going to wander into a bad part of town. You're not going to get on the wrong train and nobody's going to help you. Someone's always going to assist you. So don't feel like you're limited to the cities, where you're going to get more English in the cities. You come out to an area like Nagano and pretty quickly English disappears, but it shouldn't stop you at all from coming out here. So take advantage of the language apps that really help things now. But even if that's not an option, don't hesitate, because I think you're going to come out here and you're going to discover there was nothing to worry about. And on your next visit to Japan, you're going to head straight to those areas because you realize, no, I'll just go out there and things will work. So that's the first thing. Don't worry about language. If you can pick up a few words and phrases, it helps Japanese to relax a little bit because they can see that you're trying, helps them relax into it. But it's not going to be a problem at all. The second thing I'd say, in terms of booking your trip here, a lot of people will find our company and other companies through booking platforms online. Those are all fantastic in the sense that you can compare what's out there, the different tours that are available, and discover things that you may not have known were available. And if you choose to book with us through an online platform outside of our website, we appreciate every booking, so thank you so much. But one thing to keep in mind, and this applies to all travel companies, I think, in Japan and elsewhere, that those booking platforms sometimes charge quite substantial commissions to get the booking. So if you have the ability to book directly with the service provider, that's always appreciated something, because then the money is effectively going to the person providing you with the travel experience. Well, the reason I raise that is that it's been a really tough 2 years
Yes.
for this industry. A lot of people haven't made it through, and the ones that have probably made it through, by the skins of their teeth. It's now been 2 years without any tourism for us, and so those commissions that can be lost using the online platforms can really make a big difference, especially to small operators or family-run businesses in particular. So if you have the ability to book directly with the travel provider, it's a really good idea, because it really helps them to maximize recouping some of the lost money that they haven't been able to get access to over the last 2 years. So this really affects smaller businesses, especially family-run businesses, and you get a lot of that in regional Japan, where the accommodation or the business is all family-run, and they've had no income for 2 years. So they've been living on government subsidies and probably taking second and third jobs just to try to survive. So there's a lot of people eagerly anticipating the return of inbound. And I think that kind of, just a small thing like that, if you have the ability to do that, it really, really helps them to maximize, recouping some of the lost time and lost money that they've had.
I like that. And Peter, it's, I think, also why my show's kind of a changed format of where we were kind of going from city to city to city, kind of giving some recommendations. But from talking with others that we've had the pleasure talking to and talking with you today, I think that message that you're saying right now about the best way that listeners and people that are going to be traveling to Japan can have the money when they do travel, make that most of an impact, so that those places that we enjoy are there on a return trip and not just on this one we're going to it. I think that's a huge message to get out, and that's one I definitely want for as many people as possible to hear. So that's great.
Could I just if you don't mind, if I add on to that, that's especially so in regional Japan, because I'm sure people who are traveling in the cities, especially if you look at things like accommodation, they're probably going to be staying in large hotels run by large companies. But once you get outside of the cities and come out to areas like this, a lot of the accommodation is family run. And so that's their whole business, and may have been their business for many, many generations. So the last few years has been very, very stressful for them, because they're not just trying to keep their own business afloat. It's a business that maybe has been running through their family for generations. So they really feel their obligation to keep it going. So this extends to accommodation, and if you have the ability to book with little guest houses, local family-run things, it's always hugely appreciated by those people, and it's a way to put something back into the communities that you're visiting. So that's something that I'd really encourage people to consider when they're booking their travel, not just in Japan, I guess any country really. So.
It's great. And then, like you said, if that can't convince you about spending the night in Nagano, I think if the monkeys don't do it, I think that's a great reason to make that booking for yourself. And one thing I find Peter, you never know what you're gonna like about an area. And when I do day trips, I don't know if you're the same way, but if I plan a day trip, I almost always find myself wishing I had more time and not wanting to be rushed. So, let's go ahead and book that night and, head on from there. I think that's a great, great thing that's here. So one thing I want to ask Peter as well, I know we did at the beginning of our talk, but some people may have, joined at different times, when listening. So once again, where can listeners of Lost Without Japan find you and best look to try to take advantage of the services that you're offering?
Yeah, sure. So our website is by far the best place to go. It's snowmonkeyresorts.com. On there, you have all information about all the services and products that we provide. You have a lot of information, of course, about the monkeys and surrounding area of Nagano and central Japan. But one thing which might surprise first-time visitors to the website is the amount of information that is on the website about other areas. So, for example, pages that discuss the best museums in Tokyo, the best temples and things in Kyoto. So we have that information in recognition that people hopefully will be visiting Nagano and central Japan as part of a wider itinerary. So I think there's a lot on the website that maybe you won't be expecting to find, but a lot of information there about regions. Obviously, most detail about our region, central Japan, but also lots and lots. And increasingly, I'm currently working on putting some pages up there about Okinawa. So that'll be up there in the next week or two. And so you'll be surprised by maybe some of the information you'll find there.
I like that. And for yourself, kind of like back to yourself, for a little bit before we part ways here in a moment. What do you have any favorite podcasts, YouTube shows, or anything else that you may consume that covers, maybe Japan or other topics like that you might be interested in that you want to share?
Well, to be honest, I don't tend to listen to podcasts specifically about Japan. I think, living here and given that my job is in tourism industry, I feel like I need to turn my brain off sometimes to all things Japan. But quite honestly, I'm not just being polite. I've really enjoyed since we've been in contact. I've gone through and listened to a number of your podcasts, and I've really enjoyed them. So thank you so much for providing that, and I wish you all the best with the future episodes. I hope that this can add to that success. I personally, as I mentioned, my personal interest is in other cultures, and particularly old cultures. I studied archaeology many years ago now, and have continued that interest on through life. So I tend to listen to things like podcasts, history podcasts, podcasts of that nature, and often they touch on Japan because Japan, obviously, a lot of people are interested in it. So while it's not directly related to Japan itself, most commonly I listen to a British podcast called The Rest is History. It's hosted by a classical historian called Tom Holland and a contemporary historian called Dominic Sandbrook, and they cover a wide range of histories from the ancient world to contemporary, touching on politics and all types of things. So they do it with a lot of, obviously a lot of deep knowledge, but also with a lot of humor. So I think it's a really easy podcast to listen to, and they cover a range of topics, and Japan does come up. So that gives a little indication of kind of who I am as a person. The fact that that's what I listen to. But as I say, I take my approach to guiding in Japan. Comes from a basis of a interest in other cultures in general, and Japan is part of that picture. One thing I should mention actually feeds into that is one thing that I tend to focus on in Japan. My tours is that people probably come at Japan with the understanding that Japan is a unique country, totally different to everywhere else. It's a message that Japan likes to put out there itself. I think all cultures are unique, and all cultures blend and borrow and from each other, and Japan is no different. And so one thing that you would experience if I was guiding you is really focusing on that. Is that Japan takes things and refines them to a very Japanese way and Japanese point. But actually, most of what you see in Japan, again, is a blend of things that are borrowed, imported from other cultures. And I think it makes a more interesting story than maybe the one that people are expecting, that this is all unique and it's totally different. Yes, it's very Japanese. Everything is done in a very Japanese way, but there's lots of commonalities with other cultures. And I think it makes a richer story. And that podcast is kind of reflective of it, that it kind of that message comes across in terms of how rich, how deep the kind of global story is. And I think Japan's part of that.
I like that, and that's the more you can go, you're going to find other places to visit as well. I'm sure there's people that are listening that are going to come to Japan and have that be a trip that they do, like that once in a lifetime trip. And who knows, you may find other places that you fall in love with as well, or just like you said. I think the more we appreciate and understand others, I think the more we're going to get out of just everyday life in general. So that's great. And do you have any? I know you've hit upon a few of these, like you're looking to expand and offer more and kind of have a wider area. Do you have any goals for yourself or your role with Snow Monkey for like that 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, well, the first one is really getting things back to where they were. So we saw a lot of growth in the years since I joined the company, which was 2017 until the start of COVID. And we were growing year on year, which was fantastic. So the first thing for us is going to be getting things back to where they were. But one thing that I like about the company that I work for, we never sit still. So it's always about kind of going into the next area and what we can do. So not returning to the place that we were, but obviously going past that and expanding into new areas of Japan. Personally, in terms of my role, it's going to involve in actually continuing to develop the website and to put more and more information on there, which we hope that people find really useful, and they kind of see our website as a resource, not just for Nagano, but just central Japan and hopefully all of Japan. And then for us, it's about identifying new opportunities within Japan to partner with like-minded companies. That's where I'm going to be keeping a keen eye on this podcast, to be honest, because I think you've identified. I really enjoyed listening to the podcast the other day from the cycle company in Osaka, and so just to look at companies that might be interested in partnering or identifying people based in other areas, maybe, as I said, maybe independent guides who
Yes.
that we can partner with. Maybe they approach us with a suggestion of something that we can do, or we approach them. So that's going to be I think the next stage for us as things open up.
Wish you nothing but the best for everything, for yourself, your family, and your role with the company as a whole. And really can't wait to meet one day in person,
Yes.
Peter, and have that be sooner rather than later, 100 times over. So,
Well, it's an open invite anytime, mate, and I'll put on a few beers for you, a few Nagano beers. So anytime we're here, and I'd love to see you face to face.
Sounds good, my friend. And I appreciate it all. And once again, I'll add all of these in the show notes for site, Instagram, and all of that good stuff. But thank you so much again, Peter, for joining us today. Truly appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks for your time, Michael. All the best.
Thank you. And on behalf of Lost Without Japan and the entire crew, I'd like to thank you for joining us today for this interview. We look forward to seeing you on board again for our next regularly scheduled episode as we continue our discussion on Japan, travel, culture, and your lost without moments. To everyone out there, o genki de. Stay well, my friends.